for a tale from our travels that particularly tickled our sense of the absurd, presenting Chapter 20, Through a Glass, Chihuly Colored. Our visit to Japan's self-proclaimed Glass City reveals a curious strategy for gaining cultural street cred and concludes with an evening stroll where the only thing more startling than a tree packed with herons was the sudden appearance of bats. Let's step into the strange light of Toyama. Through a glass, Chihuly colored. Glass City dreams fade. Western art claims Eastern halls. Herons watch silence. Civic currents. The crafted cycle of Canal Koi. My brief stopover in Takayama was not destined to be another high-octane installment in our family's journey across Japan. After the orchestrated chaos of theme parks and the logistical puzzles of major cities, a quiet morning walk felt appropriate. The objective was a retro museum I'd spotted, a destination chosen for the thrilling purpose of looking at old Japanese fonts. My expectations were, shall we say, managed. My route followed a narrow canal bordering the old town, its stone banks neat and orderly. In the clear water, I was surprised to see enormous koi carp, flashes of gold and orange gliding just beneath the surface. It was a perfect, tranquil scene, a living work of art, as the town brochures might say. But a nagging question of physics began to bother me. I knew Takayama's winters were serious business, with heavy snow and temperatures that would turn this charming, shallow waterway into a solid block of ice. How were these fish, each one looking more expensive than my shoes, not destined to become carpsicles by January? They aren't. It turns out the city considers these fish to be seasonal decorations, and it has no intention of letting its investment freeze. Every year, just before the first snow, the town stages the Koi no Hikoshi, or the Koi's Move. A team from the Public Works Department, armed with waders and enormous nets, steps into the canals and performs a full-scale fish extraction. They are professional carp wranglers, rounding up hundreds of slippery residents and packing them into water-filled trucks for a trip to their winter home, a deeper municipal pond that won't freeze solid. The entire operation is a masterclass in civic problem-solving, like packing up the fine china at the end of a very long party. In Japanese culture, koi are symbols of strength and perseverance, thanks to an old legend where one climbed a waterfall and became a dragon. It's a noble story of overcoming adversity. The adversity facing these particular koi, however, is being gently herded by men in rubber boots and chauffeured to a state-funded winter spa. When the spring thaw arrives, the trucks roll back out, and the fish are ceremonially dumped back into the canals to signal that it's safe for tourists to return. After learning about this elaborate aquatic relocation program, my original quest seemed a bit weak. The retro museum, by the way, took all of 5 minutes to see. It was less a museum and more a small room someone had filled with old stuff, confirming that the most interesting thing to see that morning was floating in the water outside, waiting for its publicly funded moving day, like a prized sofa being put into seasonal storage. Ruinous rain, riddles written in rust. Having just left Takayama, a town that manages its fish population like a meticulously curated RT exhibit, we boarded a train for the 2-hour ride to Toyama. It was our first ever trip to this part of Japan, a region wedged between the Sea of Japan and a wall of mountains. Our train car, packed with tourists, felt like a rolling advertisement for a more popular destination. I had a strong feeling most of them were just using Toyama as a transfer point, a human funnel to a waiting bullet train that would rocket them back to Tokyo. The journey itself was pleasant, winding through deep green valleys that slowly flattened out as we neared the coast. The train ride from the mountains toward Toyama was a blur of green and grey. Our car rattled along, tracing rivers that cut through the landscape with the determination of a parolee heading for the border. These were the same formidable mountains that once made Toyama a hub for medicine peddlers and, later, a powerhouse for hydroelectricity. Now they were just scenery for tourists like me, snapping photos from a specially requested window seat. Through the glass, I saw a lone figure standing hip-deep in a rushing stream, rhythmically flicking a long, delicate rod. The line was a nearly invisible thread against the glittering water. The sight stuck with me. A man standing against the current, armed with what looked like nothing more than a willow switch and a piece of string. Later, I learned this wasn't just fishing. It was an ART form called tenkara. The name translates loosely to "from heaven," and its core principle is an elegant, almost aggressive simplicity. Your gear consists of a long telescopic rod, a fixed length of line, and a fly. There is no reel. For an American accustomed to seeing fishermen armed with a utility vest of gear that could double as a flotation device, the absence of a reel feels like a typo. It felt like watching a carpenter show up to build a house with only a hammer. The real heresy, however, lies in the fly, a lure called a kabari. Western fly fishing is a meticulous science of matching the hatch. Anglers carry hundreds of flies, each a hyper-realistic imitation of a specific insect in a specific stage of its life, hoping to fool a trout with a PhD in entomology. This is the Goliath of the fishing world, big, loud, and armed to the teeth with gear. Tenkara, on the other hand, is David, armed only with a single impressionistic fly. A traditional kabari is a simple affair of thread and a feather, often with the fibers tied to face forward. This reverse hackle design makes it pulse in the water, creating what is described as a legs-kicking motion. Tenkara philosophy argues that you don't need a perfect imitation of a bug, you just need to suggest the idea of a bug. It's less about fooling the fish and more about seducing IT. You are not trying to lie to the fish. You are trying to charm it into a very bad decision. This whole school of thought has a modern champion, a man named Dr. Hisao Ishigaki. Though a sports scientist by trade, he helped save this dying regional art by popularizing it for a new generation. Dr. Ishigaki is famous for advocating a one-fly approach, arguing a trout's vision isn't sharp enough to notice the fine details anyway. He believes the presentation, the subtle dance of the fly, is everything. Some masters use only one or two patterns their entire lives, confident that their skill outweighs any disguise. The reason anyone outside of Japan even knows about this minimalist rebellion is largely due to an American angler named Daniel Galhardo. In the late 2000s, he went to Japan, learned from masters like Ishigaki, and in 2009 founded Tenkara USA, becoming a kind of missionary for the reelless rod. He didn't just translate the words, he translated the entire mindset. It was a perfect distillation of the things I was finding all over Japan. A simple surface, whether it was a quiet canal in Takayama or a lone man in a stream that concealed a deep and complex system of thought. It was a reminder that sometimes the most effective tool is not having more tools. As Dr. Ishigaki himself once said, trout are not fussy. It is the angler who is fussy. Mountain metal. From firefly glow to factory flow. We arrived in Toyama, dropped our bags at the hotel, and immediately went hunting for lunch with the focus of starving wolves. We found a place specializing in steak served on a sizzling stone. The meat arrived with sound and fury, but the steak itself was just okay. I suspect eating well in Japan has permanently recalibrated my standards for beef. Still, any day that involves meat arriving at your table on a hot rock is a victory. Toyama, as it turns out, is known for a couple of things. The first is glass, an art form so integrated into the city's identity that they've embedded a huge installation of it right into the floor of the main train station. We learned this wasn't some random civic project. For centuries, Toyama was the capital of a peculiar pharmaceutical empire. Traveling salesmen, the Echu no Kusuryuri, fanned out across Japan on foot, peddling remedies for everything from indigestion to ennui. Their signature product was a pill made from bear bile, which I imagine was a tough sell. Their business model was essentially history's first subscription service. They'd leave a box of medicines and come back a year later to charge you for what you used. This trade, built on trust and questionable ingredients, made Toyama rich. All those pills needed little glass vials, which is how the city got very, very good at making glass. Today, that skill has been transformed into a world-class glass art museum, proving that the path from bear guts to Dale Chihuly sculptures is shorter than you'd think. The same geography that provided peculiar medicinal plants also created a serious plumbing problem. The mountains dump a massive amount of snowmelt into steep rivers, which historically spent a lot of time trying to rearrange the local real estate. This constant threat of flooding forced Toyama's engineers to become masters of dams and flood control. The happy side effect was a surplus of hydroelectric power, which then fueled the region's second act as a hub for aluminum smelting. The whole history is a chain reaction. Steep mountains lead to weird medicine, which leads to glass. Steep mountains also lead to violent rivers, which lead to electricity, which leads to heavy industry. It's a place that seems to have made a habit of turning its problems into profits. While the mountains shaped Toyama's industry, the bay shaped its diet and its nightlife. Specifically, the nightlife of the firefly squid. For a few weeks each spring, these little cephalopods swarm to the surface of Toyama Bay in the millions for one last glorious bioluminescent party before expiring. It is, by all accounts, the galaxy's most beautiful mass funeral. As if glowing squid weren't enough of a geological party trick, we heard the local coastline has another. In a nearby town, you can supposedly find real jade just washed up on the beach. Japan, it turns out, has the oldest jade culture in the world, stretching back thousands of years. The whole region sits on a foundation of surprising treasures. Sizzling stone cools, the glowing squid ascend, swim, old stone on the beach. Coastal calling, from a canyon's core to a luminous shore. My last aquatic observation had been a man in a mountain stream trying to fool a trout with a hook and a feather. Now our train was descending toward the coast, leaving the world of freshwater artistry for the industrial plains of Toyama Prefecture. The city itself feels like a place you pass through on your way to somewhere else, a functional hub between the Japanese Alps and the bullet train to Tokyo. We checked into our hotel, ate some steak served on a hot stone, and noted the local pride in glassmaking. But we were there for a different kind of light show. We were there for the squid. Toyama has two main claims to fame. The first is its history in the medicine trade. The second is its bay, which hosts a convention of bioluminescent squid every spring. We made our way to a museum dedicated entirely to this phenomenon, a building that may be the only one on Earth singularly focused on a 3-inch cephalopod called the firefly squid, or Hotaru Ika. Inside, you learn this creature lives a brief, brilliant, one-year life, and it comes prepared with a biological toolkit for survival. It has hundreds of light-producing organs called photophores, which it uses for everything. It lights up its belly to match the sky above, becoming invisible to things that want to eat it from below. It flashes complex signals to attract a mate or intimidate a rival, and if all else fails, a sudden blinding flash can startle a predator long enough for a quick getaway. Since the real squid party only happens from March to May, the museum stages a year-round performance called the Luminous Light Live Show. During the season, they bring in live squid and gently agitate the water, triggering a spectacular blue glow. Off-season, they use high-definition video and a backup performer, a tiny plankton they pump up from thousands of feet deep in the bay's submarine canyon through a dedicated pipe. It's an impressive workaround, like a concert promoter finding a surprisingly good tribute band to fill in for the headliner. The museum also houses a few other deep-sea oddities. There was a floating brittle star, a giant isopod that looked like a prehistoric woodlouse, and some fascinating lantern-eye fish. If the firefly squid is a self-sufficient inventor creating its own light, the lantern-eye is a master of symbiosis. It has a pouch of glowing bacteria living under each eye and can cover them with a tiny black shutter, effectively turning them on and off. It's the deep-sea equivalent of sending Morse code with a pair of biological headlights. A sign informed me precisely how to interact with some animals in a tank. I followed the instructions to the letter. I touched a crab in a shallow tank in the prescribed manner. I did not eat the creatures. That came next. After learning about the squid's elaborate defense mechanisms, we went to the museum restaurant to defeat them. We observed an assortment of squid-inspired dishes, from tempura to a surprisingly decent pizza topped with the main exhibit. The city's whole identity is wrapped up in this animal, right down to its mascot, Kirarin, a quirky, cartoonish squid who stares out from posters with unnerving enthusiasm. Finally, we went out to the coast to see the bay itself. This is where the magic happens. An incredibly deep V-shaped canyon cuts right up to the shoreline, a feature that makes this spectacular gathering possible. Every spring, currents push the ascending squid into this natural funnel, concentrating them near the surface in massive numbers for their spawning run. After they release and fertilize their eggs, they die, their one-year performance complete. It was our first time seeing the north of Japan, and we walked down to the shore to touch the ocean. The water was cold, a shock to the system, like dipping your hand into the dark, silent engine that powers a billion tiny lights. Refracted reflections, Toyama's translucent transformation. Having spent a day marveling at creatures that make their own light, it seemed fitting that our next stop was a building dedicated to mastering it. But nature, not wanting to be upstaged, gave us one last opening act. On the sidewalk, looking entirely unbothered by city life, sat a perfect, bright green tree frog. It stared at us with an unblinking eye, as if an official greeter from the local amphibian union had been sent to see us off. Our destination was the Toyama Glass Art Museum, which is a bit like saying you're visiting a building. The place itself, a magnificent structure called the Toyama Kirari, is the main event. It was designed by the architect Kengo Kuma, who seems to have a philosophical disagreement with his contemporary Tadao Ando. Where Ando sees a problem and thinks, what this needs is more concrete, Kuma seems to think, you know what would fix this, an impossible amount of wood. The inside is a soaring atrium with cedar planks spiraling up to the ceiling, creating a space that feels like you're standing inside the world's most elegant pipe organ. The strange thing is, this temple of fragile art is also the main city library. Students were hunched over textbooks just a few feet from sculptures that probably cost more than their future education. It's a bold social experiment, combining the two quietest places on Earth. One feels the urge to whisper, not just out of respect for the readers, but for fear that a loud sneeze might shatter a $1 million installation. This whole Glass City identity is a surprisingly recent invention. For centuries, Toyama was a hub for medicine, and its biggest industry was churning out countless little glass vials and bottles. When that industry faded, the city looked at its historical skill set and executed a brilliant pivot. They went from making practical, boring glass to making impractical, beautiful glass. The museum is the triumphant result of this civic rebranding, a monument to the idea that if your old industry dies, just make a prettier version of it and call it art. And to legitimize the whole enterprise, they did what many Japanese institutions do. They got a hold of a big, famous Western artist. The museum's crown jewel is a permanent exhibit by Dale Chihuly, the American master of fantastically expensive glass that looks like it exploded in a candy factory. His wild, colorful shapes are a riot of form and color, a complete contrasting to Kuma's clean, geometric architecture. It's an interesting strategy, as if they feel the excellent local art needs a famous headliner to draw the crowds, like a music festival booking a legacy rock band to sell tickets. After a spin through the gift shop, we took a walk through the park, complete with a castle, as dusk settled. A single tree was heavy with roosting herons, their stark white forms looking like forgotten laundry against the darkening branches. It was an odd, impressive sight. Then we found some bats, flitting silently overhead. My wife did not like the bats. She has a clear and unwavering policy regarding flying mammals, and that policy is to be somewhere else. And that was our day. Tomorrow, we get on a bullet train. Next stop, Tokyo. And that brings us to the close of Chapter 20, Through a Glass, Chihuly Colored, leaving behind a city built on glass and a critical thought on how museums seek validation. In our final chapter, the journey culminates in Tokyo, where the protagonist navigates from ancient demons and loyal dogs to the commercial chaos of Shibuya. Thanks for listening to The Rise the Limit. If you enjoyed this journey, the complete travelogue is available right now as a Kindle book on Amazon, Shinkansen and Sensibility. And if you want to come behind the scenes, get bonus content, you can join my community on Patreon. And now for a tale from our travels that particularly tickled our sense of the absurd, Chapter 21, of Monsters and Modern Men. This Tokyo expedition pits a 500-year-old demon-slaying legend and a museum of parasites against the full-volume chaos of modern commerce. Find out how the day's great quest concludes not with a roar, but with a Wagyu burger eaten inside a cloud. Of Monsters and Modern Men. Ancient demons dwell in scrolls while modern monsters rise from neon depths. Rapid return, regrettable rations. We checked out of our hotel in Toyama, officially closing the loop on a grand tour of Japan that had taken us from ancient temples to American-influenced Okinawa. The DoubleTree there, I am now prepared to state for the record, is the finest hotel in its corporate family. It makes some American Four Seasons feel like they're being managed by a well-meaning but incompetent golden retriever. I'm thinking of you, Austin. At breakfast, even the pork sausage seemed to taste better, imbued with the quiet moral superiority of being allegedly carbon neutral. I'm not sure of the science, but I imagine it involves outfitting the pig with a solar panel. With that, we were back where it all began, Tokyo. The journey from Toyama was aboard the Shinkansen, a conveyance so efficient it feels less like a train and more like a form of polite teleportation. The trip took 90 minutes. By car, it would have been a 5-hour slog through a psychic wasteland of highway tolls and rest-stop coffee. The bullet train does not demand you remove your belt. It does not X-ray your laptop as if it might contain state secrets. It does not treat your bottle of water like a controlled substance. It simply arrives, collects you, and deposits you hundreds of miles away before you've finished your snack, all while being sometimes cheaper than a domestic flight. Stepping off the train, I felt emboldened by Japanese competence. After witnessing their mastery of Italian food, a cuisine they've adopted and perfected with terrifying precision, I decided to test their skills on another foreign import. I sought out Japanese Mexican food, hoping for a revelation. I pictured tortillas folded with the geometric genius of origami, salsa with the subtle complexity of a haiku. I got Moe's. Or perhaps it was Chipotle, but with rice that had marginally better self-esteem. It was a faithful, soulless replica, like a cover band that plays all the right notes but has none of the original's swagger. Almost all absurdity of conduct arises from the imitation of those whom we cannot resemble. Samuel Johnson. Demon's Drink, defeating a dynastic dread. We had finally completed the circle, returning to Tokyo after a quest for Japanese Mexican food that tasted suspiciously like a suburban strip mall. Having failed to find a respectable modern take on an old classic, it only seemed right to seek out a respectable old take on an even older classic. So we headed for the Suntory Museum of Art, a place we'd failed to get into on a previous trip. This time, we made it. Redemption tastes better than carbon-neutral sausage. The main event was an exhibit on the Shutendoji, a famous story from about 500 years ago, told on a massive, slowly unfurling scroll. It was like watching the world's first superhero blockbuster. If the film was made of ancient paper and the projectionist was an attendant who looked like he'd confiscate your phone for breathing too loudly. The plot was simple. A team of heroes sets out to kill a cannibalistic demon, or Oni. This demon, Shutendoji, wasn't born a monster. The early scenes on the scroll depicted him as a brilliant but difficult kid who hated monastery life, preferred forbidden sake to studying, and generally held a grudge against the world. Then came the monster turn. One version of the story says he put on a demon mask for a party and it fused to his face, his inner demons making a break for the outside. Another, more dramatic version shows him transforming in a fit of pure rage during a feast. Either way, he was kicked off the sacred mountain and set up a fortress near Kyoto, where he began his main hobby, abducting and eating the daughters of the rich and famous. This wasn't just about nutrition. It was about symbolically chewing up the social order. The hero for this tale is Minamoto no Raiko, who, along with his 4 trusty retainers, form a sort of demon-slaying A-team. They don't just kick down the door, they go undercover as mountain monks, challenge the demon to a drinking contest, and then give him sake laced with a divine poison. Once Shutendoji and his cronies are passed out, the heroes draw their swords. The climax, painted in faded but vivid color, is Raiko slicing off the demon's enormous head. And then, in a final special effect that would make a modern horror director proud, the severed head flies around the room and takes a bite out of the hero. Good, clean, medieval fun. The Oni themselves were fascinating. For centuries they were depicted as monstrous warlords with classic East Asian features, a threat to the state, not the soul. But then you get to a section of the art where something changes. After the Portuguese and Dutch arrived in the 16th century, the demons suddenly started looking European. Artists began painting Oni to resemble these southern barbarians, or Nanban, with their lighter hair, big noses and puffy trousers. For a time, it seems the most terrifying monster you could imagine was a lost merchant from Lisbon. It's a little historical note that feels pulled from my own journey through Okinawa, where American bases and Blue Seal ice cream told a similar story of an island's identity being shaped and sometimes caricatured by the outsiders who arrived on its shores. From the quiet contemplation of ancient demons who looked like Dutch traders, we moved to the Ritz-Carlton to confront the modern demons of hotel loyalty programs. We got the same large suite we had last time, a free upgrade about twice the size of the room we'd actually paid for, and I silently put away the politely indignant face I had prepared for a downgrade. The victory, however, was short-lived. I had paid more for this stay. I had a shinier, more important-sounding status with Marriott now. But I did not have club access, a perk we'd enjoyed on our prior, cheaper, less prestigious visit. It was a minor irritation, but an irritation nonetheless. The Art of Story Without Strife, Kishotenketsu Narratives. Returning from the Suntory Museum felt like leaving a medieval brawl. My mind was still reeling from the story of the Shuten Doji, a tale that ended, as all good tales should, with a demon getting tricked, beheaded, and its severed head flying around the room trying to bite people. It was a neat, tidy package of good versus evil, where the resolution was a sword swing. This kind of thinking, I was beginning to realize, made me a regulator of resolutions, a self-appointed judge who expected every story to end with a clear winner and a very clear, very decapitated loser. It's a simple system. It works. Then Japan introduced a new system, one that apparently doesn't require a monster to slay. It's a narrative structure called Kishotenketsu, a storytelling philosophy that migrated from Chinese poetry and set up shop across East Asia. The whole apparatus is built on 4 parts. First comes the key, or introduction, where you meet some people and see their house. Next is show, the development, where those people do things in and around that house, so far, so familiar. It's the third part, 10, where things get weird. This is the twist, a new element that seems to have wandered in from a completely different story. The final part, Ketsu, is the conclusion, where the story somehow stitches this bizarre new element into the fabric of the beginning, making it all make sense without anyone having to punch a god. For a brain raised on the 3-act structure, this is profoundly unsettling. We Westerners are conditioned to look for the obstacle, the antagonist, the ticking clock. Our stories are about a hero's journey to overcome. Kishotenketsu, on the other hand, seems more interested in the why of the journey itself, using surprise and new perspective as its engine. Is it possible to tell a compelling story where the main event isn't a confrontation but a discovery? The most straightforward example is the Yonkoma, a Japanese 4-panel comic strip where each panel is a beat, setup, elaboration, left turn, punchline. It's a joke-telling structure applied to a whole narrative. The concept finally clicked into place when I thought about My Neighbor Totoro. The key is simple. 2 sisters, Satsuki and Mei, move to a rustic house while their mother is sick in a nearby hospital. The show is them exploring their new, slightly spooky home and the surrounding countryside. It's a perfectly nice slice-of-life drama. Then comes the 10. The girls find giant, furry, magical forest spirits. This isn't an obstacle, it's a genre shift. The story abruptly changes from a gentle family drama into a fantasy. The Ketsu arrives when little Mei gets lost. Her sister doesn't have to fight a monster to save her. Instead, she asks her new supernatural friend Totoro for help. The magical cat bus appears, resolves the real-world problem, and the story ends with the family reunited. The twist became the solution. If Totoro is the gentle introduction, Bong Joon-ho's Parasite is the advanced course taught in a sealed bunker. In its key, we meet the destitute Kim family. The show sees them expertly con their way into the service of the wealthy Park family, a plan unfolding with unnerving success. You think you're watching a clever social satire. Then the 10 happens. The former housekeeper returns during a storm, revealing that her husband has been living in a secret basement for years. The movie you were watching is over. You are now watching a psychological thriller. The Ketsu is the chaotic, violent fallout where this hidden world collides with the one above, leading to a grim conclusion that resolves the plot but leaves the social inequities utterly unchanged. It's proof that a story doesn't need a head-on collision to generate power. It can be powered by a sideswipe, a sudden turn that redefines the road you thought you were on. It's the difference between a story that ends with a hero holding a demon's severed, still snapping head, and one that ends with two sisters finding each other in the dusk, delivered from worry by a bus that is also a cat. Strange Souls, a saga of science and Shibuya. In his book, Parasite Rex, Carl Zimmer observes, "To parasites, we are the world." After spending the morning contemplating a demon that terrorized Kyoto from the outside, it felt only right to pay tribute to the smaller monsters that work from within. This logic led us to the Meguro Parasitological Museum, an institution I was keen to visit and my son soon was keen to forget. It's the world's only museum dedicated to these unwelcome passengers, founded by a man who turned a peculiar interest into a national bulwark against disease. The place is a monument to a single, magnificent obsession. Dr. Satoru Kamagai, a pathologist, poured his personal fortune into this collection over 70 years. He became the unofficial clearinghouse for every strange worm or fluke pulled from a patient, pet, or wild animal in Japan, effectively crowdsourcing a collection of 60,000 specimens. The ground floor is a library of horrors, with over 300 specimens suspended in jars, a silent, floating menagerie of things you'd rather not think about. My son stared at them with the same expression he'd have if I told him broccoli was now our only food group. I, on the other hand, was fascinated. The museum exists because, in post-war Japan, these creatures were a public health nightmare. The stark, clinical displays are a victory monument, a celebration of modern sanitation's triumph over things that burrow. The second floor got more personal, focusing on the parasites of man. The main event, the museum's Mona Lisa, is an 8.8-meter tapeworm. That's 29 feet. It was recovered from a man who contracted it from eating trout sashimi. To help you appreciate the sheer, horrific scale of it, a thick rope of the same length hangs coiled nearby, waiting for you to unravel it. The feeling of that rough rope paying out through your hands on and on is a physical lesson in just how much unwanted guest you can fit inside a human body. The gift shop, naturally, continues the theme. You can buy t-shirts celebrating the tapeworm or, for the true connoisseur of the bizarre, keychains with a real fluke or isopod locked forever in clear acrylic. It's the perfect souvenir for the person who has everything, including a strong stomach. From the wonders of internal biology, we pivoted to a corporation's vision for our external future. Japan Railway has redeveloped a massive train yard into what it hopes is a blueprint for the city of tomorrow. It featured self-driving AI cars gliding silently along prescribed routes and, on a pedestal, a flying car. Having a flying car on display is like having a famous racehorse taxidermied in the winner's circle. You get the idea, but it feels like you've missed the most important part. We walked through a neat, multicolored art installation before deciding we'd had enough of the future and were ready for the beautiful chaos of the present. We plunged into Shibuya. The famous Scramble Crossing is less an intersection and more a human particle accelerator, a tidal wave of people flowing from all directions under the glare of colossal video screens. In the middle of all this noise and motion stands a small, quiet point of stillness, the bronze statue of a dog named Hachiko. Here, in the busiest district on Earth, is a monument to patience. Hachiko was an Akita owned by a university professor named Ueno. Every day, the dog would see his master off at Shibuya Station and return in the afternoon to greet him. This went on until May 1925, when the professor died of a cerebral hemorrhage at work and never came home. For the next 9 years, Hachiko came back to this spot every single day at the exact time the train was due, to wait for a man who would never return. His story turned him into a national hero, a living symbol of devotion. It also saved his entire breed. At the time, there were only about 30 purebred Akitas left in Japan. Hachiko's fame sparked a preservation effort that pulled the breed back from the brink. The first statue was put up in 1934, with the old dog himself as the guest of honor. It was melted down for the war effort, but replaced right after. The story's fame even reached Helen Keller, who was so moved she was given an Akita puppy, introducing the breed to America. Hachiko's story feels like a simple fable, but like everything else here, there are layers. When he finally died, he wasn't just buried. His pelt was preserved and mounted, and it's now on display in the National Science Museum. His ashes were buried next to his master's grave, a reunion in the end. I've developed a fixation on these hidden narratives, the often strange and complicated truth sitting just beneath the surface of a painting, a building, or even a sentimental statue of a dog. Standing there amidst the Shibuya roar, you see the simple bronze animal. But the real story is so much more. A history of war, the salvation of a species, and the strange, enduring journey of one dog's body and soul. Canines and Chaos, a clouded calm. My visit to the grave of a parasitic tapeworm was memorable. My tour of a futuristic AI-driven city was interesting. But standing before the statue of Hachiko, the dog who waited for his dead master for almost a decade, was something else entirely. It seems that in Japan, a single dog's devotion can launch a national preservation movement. His loyalty didn't just immortalize him, it helped rescue his entire breed and 5 of its cousins, a group known collectively as the Nihon Ken. Hachiko was an Akita, a breed whose recent history resembles a messy divorce. After World War II, American GIs brought Akitas home, favoring a larger, thicker-boned version that had been crossbred for fighting. They took this bruiser of a dog and, in true American fashion, made it bigger. The result is the American Akita, a bear of a dog that looks like it could bench press a small car. Japanese purists, horrified, spent decades trying to restore the breed to its original, more refined, fox-like form. The American Akita is a bear of a dog. A dog like a bear is not the Japanese Akita. It's an ideological split written in fur and bone, a schism over what a dog should be. The other 5 native breeds are just as distinct. The Shiba Inu, smallest of the clan, has become an internet celebrity, which is a strange fate for a dog originally bred to hunt birds in the mountains. They are famously more like cats, aloof, clean, and prone to emitting a noise known as the Shiba scream, a sound that suggests you've just informed it that its favorite TV show has been cancelled. The Shikoku Ken looks like a wolf and was bred to hunt boar on an isolated island, giving it the pure-blooded confidence of someone who has never had to listen to anyone else's opinion. Then there is the Kai Ken, a medium-sized dog with a stunning tiger stripe coat for camouflage, a feature that seems slightly theatrical for a modern apartment. The Kishu Ken is almost always pure white, a color chosen by hunters for the grimly practical reason that it made the dog harder to mistake for a deer, preventing the kind of accident that ruins a hunting trip. Finally, there's the Hokkaido Ken, a dog from Japan's frigid north, bred by the Ainu people to have the stamina to hunt bears in the snow. These are not dogs you get to accessorize a handbag. They are living artifacts of a wilder Japan. Having absorbed all this noble canine history, my son decided it was time to dive headfirst into the commercial madness of modern Tokyo. The Godzilla store was a chaotic shrine to destruction. We managed a picture of my son inside the Nintendo store, a brief moment of calm before the storm. The Pokémon store was a swirling fever dream of primary colors, screeching electronic noises, and the collective desire of 1,000 children. By the time my son cheerfully suggested the Capcom store, my brain had been fully tenderized. We surrendered, hailing a taxi in the pouring rain for a full strategic retreat to the Ritz-Carlton. A Wagyu burger for me and sushi for my son were on their way to the room. The rain grew thicker and the view from our window, high above the city, disappeared. We were inside a cloud, a quiet, white world, finally free from flashing lights and frantic noise. Good night, Godzilla. And so our battle with the monsters of Tokyo concludes, where the greatest foe was not a mythical demon, but the sensory overload of a modern shopping district. It seems the most heroic act is a strategic retreat, proving that sometimes the best way to find peace is inside a cloud with a well-made burger. But while one conflict ends in quiet refuge, what new divisions arise when a family tries to navigate the city's foundations of law and art together? If you enjoyed this journey, the complete travelogue is available right now as a Kindle book on Amazon. Shinkansen and Sensibility. And if you want to come behind the scenes and get bonus content, you can join my community on Patreon.